Okay, so we are now live on the webinar. So what I'd like to ask you to do is just to make sure there's no technical issues going on. I just ask you to type yes into the type box, into the chat box, if you can hear me. If you can, just type in yes, and then we can just get started. Cool. All right, so I'm seeing a couple of yeses jump in. Yeah, okay, great. Everyone can hear me. That's brilliant. Okay, great. Well, what we'll do is we'll crack on. So basically what we're going to talk about in the next half hour or so is we're going to talk about changing your career to coding, how you might go about doing that, and some suggestions for that as well. So Jason has asked the video restricted. So Jason, I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but for yourself and anyone else who's having any trouble viewing the video, if you just refresh the page, it should be fine. So just to start off, I'd like to ask this question. I'm going to pop up a poll here. So are you considering a career change? I'm just curious because sometimes people come along for varying reasons. So I've put up a poll there. So if you want to answer yes or no to that, it'll be interesting to see the results. All right, I'm seeing 100% yes so far, which is interesting. Either everyone's hitting yes or only one person has hit yes. But I think that would reference that most people are actually for yes. So there's 8% who are saying no. So that's interesting. Okay. Well, it's good to get a gauge on that. I'm going to go with that 92 to 8% sort of percentage and continue on. So it's good to know. I'd be curious, the person who said no, they're not looking for a career change, to hear that specific story. So if you'd like to enter that in the chat box, it'd be really interesting to hear that. Okay, great. Well, what we'll do is we'll continue on. So what I'd like to do is just cover off everything we'll be talking about. So we'll do a bit of an introduction because I'm just sort of a disembodied voice at the minute. Then we'll talk about, give you some context around the coding industry, talk about 3 student stories, give you a little more detail about the Code Institute program, because that's always the question we get, which is, tell me more about the program, give me all the details. We're happy to do that. We'll do general Q&A, and there's also an attendee bonus. So if you're, what I suggest is make sure you hang around to the end, because there's 2 bonuses today for everyone who's attending, and they're well worth your time. So we'll be taking about 30, maybe 40 minutes max on this webinar. So make sure you stick around to the end. So, oh yeah, that's one of the bonuses. So get access to 4 free coding modules if you stay until the end. And there's a second bonus that's really, really worth your time. So I suggest you stick around for that one. So just to introduce myself, my name is Owen O'Neill. I'm an education advisor here at Code Institute. And what that essentially means is I chat to people who are interested in basically starting a career in coding and talk to them a little bit. It's interesting there. Cullum said he answered no. I'm a graphic designer and think some greater coding skills could come in handy. Cullum, I would tend to agree with you. I think it would come in handy. So what I'd like to talk about is who we are. And Code Institute as a company, this is kind of the simplest way we can put it. Code Institute is an education company that makes developers. That's who we are, I suppose. Then in terms of what we do is we help you change or upgrade your career. So someone like Cullum, he's already a graphic designer, he's already in his career, doesn't necessarily want to become a developer, but would like to know some development skills. So that would be an upgrader, and then everyone else is looking to change their career. And actually, it'd be interesting to hear the previous careers or the current careers of people who are thinking of changing. I'll put my own example first, since I'm asking the question. A number of years ago, I was actually a guitar teacher, and that was my entire career. And then I went through a lot of training and sort of different jobs, and now I'm here at a very different point. So it'd be interesting to hear what people are doing at the moment. So just to give some context to what we're talking about today, which is the coding industry, here's an idea for you. So this is what's known as the global skills shortage. So essentially what this graph shows is that the red line is the number of computer science students, and then the blue line is actually the number of computing jobs that will be available. So you can see that there's a huge gulf between the red line and the blue line, and that's what we actually call the skills gap, or you've heard it as the skills shortage. So it's interesting to see a couple of people popping up in the chat box. So Evelyn has said she's a graphic designer and teacher, so that's interesting, a sort of combination of the two. Sean is in sales and marketing, and then Thomas is a teacher. So that's brilliant. That's really interesting. And Lewis is an outdoor instructor. That I remember speaking to someone who was actually what did he do? It was something to do with kayaking. I think he was a kayak teacher. Kieran is an accountant. That's interesting. So That's great. And I suppose the interesting thing is, there's lots of reasons for each of you that you're looking to change career, but they probably mostly boil down to the same three. So it'd be interesting to hear what you think about that. So sometimes we get asked why there's such a huge skills gap. I mean, there's a massive gulf between the number of computer science students who are available to take jobs and the number of jobs that are available. So there's a lot more jobs than there are people. So here's one example I usually give. In 2010, this is a Chevy Volt, came out in 2010. It has 10 million lines of code in it. Just 6 years later, this is the Ford F-150. It has 150 million lines of code in it. So the amount of code in vehicles grew by 15 times in just 6 years. So cars and the automotive industry, traditionally something that doesn't really need a lot of coders, suddenly needs a lot of developers. So, and that's just one industry. If you expand it to all industries, you end up with this thing called the global skills shortage, which is where there's 4 billion people who either have a laptop or a mobile phone, and there's huge revenue opportunities within that as well. And what this leads to, and it'd be interesting to know, but I suppose what it leads to is an increase in salary. So if you're just starting off in this career, about 30,000. We've heard of code institute students going off into the workplace and starting off on 30,000. Now, it depends on your background, your skill level, all those sorts of things, but it's not ridiculous to sort of think that. And the salary tends to grow quite quickly. Depending on how long you've been in the job. And in developers in particular, it goes up very quickly. So Connor has asked, I wonder what language they used for that. Connor, I've actually never asked that question. I'm not sure. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is 3 student stories, just to give you an idea, because one of the hardest things when you're contemplating a career change is it's a couple of questions. One question is, can I actually do this? Can I move, like if you're like Kieran, can you really move from being an accountant to working in development? Or if you're like Evelyn, can I move from being a graphic designer to being a web developer? It's very hard to know that. So these 3 stories will sort of help you see whether it's possible for you and if it sort of makes sense to you. And then the second thing is, if you have any specific questions, like, I'm a graphic designer, I've been a graphic designer for 5 years, what do you think coding could actually do to help my career? Feel free to ask those questions. So the first story I'm going to talk about is Dara. So you've probably seen Dara at some point if you've been on the Code Institute site at all. And essentially he went from working in a deli to working in development. So the reason why is it was about earnings for Dara. He sort of said, I want to be able to make enough money that I can be comfortable. But it was really leading to a career path that he could be proud of as well. He was just working in a deli, and it wasn't what he wanted. It wasn't what he pictured when he left school at age 18. So I suppose what his background was, he had done a little bit of coding before. And we find that a lot, that, for Code Institute students, there tends to be some amount of coding before. And it's usually a very small amount, or so they say. So in Dara's case, he did maybe 8 weeks of a coding course. That was the extent of it. For other people, it's been something as small as they helped their friend put a web page together, or even smaller than that. Then I suppose he did the Code Institute bootcamp with us, and now he's working as a developer. And there was an interesting journey there. So I suppose what he wanted was those earnings and that career path. And that's what he was really looking for. So then I'll share with you another one, and we're going to run through these relatively quickly. So this is Ronan's story, where he moved from business to development. That's not actually Ronan. I don't think he could grow a beard quite as cool as that, nor could I. So Ronan's background was sort of similar. He had done some coding, but he mainly had a business background. Then he did the Code Institute bootcamp, and he finally ended up working for Accenture. So just to give you an idea of how unusual that is, Accenture usually only take people with a 2-1 in computer science from Trinity, if they're hiring for that, 2-1 and up. So they're quite exclusive when they do look for developers. So the fact that he was able to get in there on the back of a coding bootcamp is quite unusual. So I suppose the reason why he wanted to change, he saw himself one day as a business owner. He didn't want to be just a worker his whole life. Those are his words, not mine. Then there is the creativity aspect of it. The idea that he could sort of make things and make things happen was really attractive to him. And his favorite reason for me It's my favorite reason that he had was this idea of meaning, the idea that he could change the world with the work he was doing. It's very lofty, it's very ambitious, but I always found it very impressive that that was something he was aiming for. So in terms of what he was looking for, there was a couple of caveats for him. It wasn't possible for him to go back to university. So university might be a 2-year diploma at night, or it might be another 4-year degree. A Code Institute bootcamp is about 12 weeks long, so it's a very compressed type of learning. He wanted that immersion that comes with that. So the bootcamp is full-time, 12 weeks, 9 to 5, and he wanted to meet like-minded people. He also found that teaching himself was an incredibly tedious thing to do, and he really had absolutely no interest in being both the student and the teacher. So he just wanted to go somewhere where he could just study instead of having to figure things out for himself. So the final story, and we'll move into another topic then, is from tech support to development. So this is Mark's story. So Mark really had no background in tech, really. So it originally started off that he had a side gig. So a friend of his asked him to take a look at a project because he had a vague interest in coding and figuring things out. He enjoyed that side gig so much that he actually spent the entire weekend working on it and immediately got himself a job in tech support. From there, he was actually invited onto the development team because he had such a keen interest. He finally did a Code Institute bootcamp, the mentored online version of it, and he got a promotion within 3 months, partly because he now knew more than other people on his team, and partly because he had backfilled his knowledge that maybe wasn't as, what's the word? Well, when you teach yourself, there tends to be gaps in your knowledge. So he filled in all those gaps. I suppose the reason why was, one, there was a sort of changing situation at work. Things were moving around and companies were merging, and it can be a little bit unsettling when that's happening. He wanted to backfill knowledge, as I said, and he also wanted to learn the latest skills, which is the front-end full stack stuff that we teach. So those were the 3 stories. So what I'd like to move into now is, in terms of career change, I've given you some examples there. You've sort of seen what that actually looks like. And what I'm curious is, do you still think you need a career change? So if you have any further questions on that, it'd be interesting to hear. But you've heard 3 stories, 3 people who went from not really knowing anything about coding to suddenly knowing a lot about coding and actually working in the field, and they've changed their career successfully. So I suppose that's the question. Do you still think you need a career change after that? So I'm seeing 100% yes, and there'll probably be 1 vote of no from, who is it? The graphic designer, which is Cullum. So that's interesting. So it's just hovering at 100% yes. So that's interesting. Okay, great. Oh, 14% no, 80. Okay, so there's some movement now. So I think the poll has loaded for some people. So it's about 89% yes and 11% no. Just for my own curiosity, and I'm going to continue on with the presentation, but I'd like to ask people to type into the chat box why they're not going to make a career change. Like, what is actually holding them back? For myself, when I was thinking of changing career from a guitar teacher, which was a number of years ago now, it was partly financial. But a lot of it was, I honestly didn't believe I could change from what I was doing. I thought I was kind of stuck where I was, and that was my skill set, and I just sort of lived with that. So I'd be really curious to know, if you'd like to type in the chat box, what is it that's actually holding you back from making that career change? It'd be interesting to see that. So I'm going to continue on with the presentation, but if you would like to share that, I'd be very interested to see that and actually sort of understand more what people are going through, and if it's similar to my experience or dissimilar. So we'll crack on anyway. So what I'd like to do is give you an overview of the course and how it works, and how you can go from knowing absolutely nothing about coding to knowing enough that you can actually start a new career as a web developer. So to give you an overview, we have this thing called Stream Zero. So if you're absolutely brand new to coding, what it'll actually do is it'll actually teach you the absolute basics, the stuff that is quite basic, that I suppose it's, how to explain it? So Streams 1, 2, and 3 are relatively advanced in terms of topics. So what we do with Stream 0 is we teach you the absolute fundamentals of coding and get those sort of out of the way so that when you're on the course itself, you're really learning the stuff that's actually going to help make you employable. So then Stream 1, 2, and 3, we're going to go into more detail now. So Stream 1 is essentially learn how to build websites in hours, not days. So you can rapidly prototype websites using this thing called Bootstrap, and there's a huge amount of content in Stream 1 and a huge amount to learn. But to, how do you compress that all down into one slide? I suppose the way I'll sort of explain it to you is after 4 weeks, at the end of Stream 1, you'll be able to create a website that is not unlike Yelp or imdb.com. And I can actually show you some examples. So I'm actually going to just do something a little unusual now. I usually just keep going with the presentation, but I'm going to show you a student project. So this is created by a guy called Obiara, and he created this project after 4 weeks on the program. So what it actually is it's called Night Owl, and it's designed to help people find good music venues in their city. So you can see nice striking visuals, but what we'll do is we'll search for rock. So we want to find some rock clubs in Dublin. Let's see if it works. Funnily enough, the last time I did this, the entire app crashed. Oh, good, it didn't do that this time. So what it's doing here is it's pulling in a couple of different things. So on the left-hand side, you can see here, this is Yelp.com. So it's pulling in various pieces of information from Yelp. On this side here, it's actually mapping out all the different places that they're actually in. So Hard Rock Cafe is one. And some of these don't have enough information. They couldn't actually pull in the right info because they're not on Yelp. So that's something that he created after 4 weeks. So you can see it's actually fairly complex what he's doing. The actual design is sort of simple, but the fact that you can type in this and it'll pull in information from Yelp and pull in information from Google Maps, you can get quite advanced quite quickly. So I'm going to go back to the presentation now. I just thought it would be interesting to show you very quickly. That's after 4 weeks on the full time. That's kind of what you walk away with. So let's continue on with this now. So there we go. So Stream 2 is going beyond basic websites. So what I showed you there would be a relatively basic website. And you're going to create your first web application on Stream 2. So the way this really works is I suppose we had an absolutely fascinating example of this being used on the current course of students. And what it was is one of the students is actually a type 1 or type A diabetic. I forget the exact terminology. And he found that he had this device that's hooked into him that actually helps him regulate his insulin levels, which is very important for him staying alive and healthy. So what he would do is there's a little SD card in that device, and he would actually load it up onto his computer, and he would load it onto the manufacturer's website. Now, what would come out was a lot of boring sheets and a lot of boring sort of very difficult. It was very difficult to ascertain what the problems were when it came to his insulin levels. So what he actually did is he built an application that could actually show him the different parts of the things that were going up and down. So I'm just going to see if I can open up a example of this. So I'm guessing that this is the right link, and it may take a little while to load. It's quite a big application. So this particular example is actually a Game of Thrones dashboard. So I think it could be cleaner designed, but I think the actual how it actually works is quite interesting. So this is akin to a Google Analytics dashboard. So what it is taking a lot of very boring data and putting it into an actual application that is actually sort of useful in some way. So instead of seeing that Stark had 108 people killed in a spreadsheet, you can actually see it here. Now, the applications for this is kind of a jokey one. Oh, Connor actually has the gluco trend. So sorry, this is a much better version. So this is actually the gluco trend. So to explain this, and I'll do my best to do this, there's very high levels of blood glucose. There's high, there's normal, and there's low. So what he actually did is he sort of said, from September to October, how are things looking? There's a lot of very high glucose. That's bad. That's not a good thing. So if you look at it, you can see when it's high, what kind of time of day is it high? Well, it's quite high in the, actually sort of spread out, but in the afternoon in particular, it seems to be, in the afternoon and the evening, it seems to be particularly high. So that's something he could actually use to bring back into his, how his insulin is regulated. So thanks for that link, Connor. That's actually really helpful. So let's go back to the presentation. So it can be hard to explain that particular project sometimes, but that was a very good way of explaining. So thank you again, Connor. So finally, in stream 3, this is where you bring all your skills together into one web application that will explain, like Kickstarter.com. So it's a very complex one in that there's lots of things going on. You'll be building forums, you'll be building blogs, you'll be building login and registration, you'll be integrating with PayPal and Stripe. There's all kinds of things you'll be building. And really the point of these 3 projects is so that you're actually able to go to employers and say, look, I know that I'm coming from here, from a very new direction. And I'll use myself as an example. If I was still a guitar teacher and I was looking at this, I would say, you know I was a guitar teacher for the past 5 years, but these are my 3 projects that I've created in 3 months. It hasn't taken me very long. If this is how far I've gotten in 3 months, imagine where I could be in a year if I worked here. So that's kind of the approach that our students take when it comes to going out to employers. So those are the 3 streams. So if there was ever a slide that equated death by PowerPoint, it'd probably be this one. So I'm just going to talk more about everything that comes with this in order to help you get everything you possibly can out of the program. I'm just also interested to hear that Lewis has been brave enough to type into the chat box that for him, the reason he's not leaving his career is he's afraid to start a new career from scratch, worried it's too risky to leave my current job. The follow-up question I'd have there, Lewis, is why exactly do you want to leave your current job? For myself with the lessons, it was a case of that I was just bored. I was bored of what I was doing. I wasn't interested in it anymore. So it'd be interesting to hear your reasons on it. So, what I'd like to talk about is how we put the course together. So one of the biggest, most important contributors to the curriculum was actually this thing called the Industry Advisory Council. So essentially, the idea of it is that you're learning skills that employers are looking for right now. So the Industry Advisory Council is made up of firms like Morgan McKinley, Accenture, Dell, PayPal, GlaxoSmithKline. And what we do is we go to them with our syllabus and we say, this is what we're teaching. How does this tie into what you're looking for in terms of employees? How does it tie? If someone had these skills, like we're showing you now, how interested would you be in interviewing or even potentially hiring that person? And depending on what they say, we adjust the website. So we also pair you up with mentors. So if you're in the online program, we'll pair you with a mentor who will work with you for 20 hours throughout the course. And then in the classroom, we have mentors that have worked for Fortune 500 companies. They've founded startups, and basically they allow you to accelerate your learning. So you're learning from the best all the time. It's not a case that we're, sending you through to people who are, 2 weeks ahead of you in terms of their development. Then there's accreditation as well. So when you're going on a program like this, it's important that you walk away with not only a portfolio of projects that show off your work, but also an accredited diploma that sort of proves that you have the knowledge that you have. So it's a level 5 on the European qualification framework. That's really important because if it's on the European qualification framework, it means it's recognized in Germany, it's recognized in France, in Italy, in the UK, wherever you want to go in Europe, it's recognized. And it's also globally recognized because it's on that European qualifications framework. It's an equivalent to a level 6 diploma in Ireland. And if you want to look up the accreditation, it's actually Edinburgh Napier University is the people who do that. So this is what it actually looks like. This is what you walk away with. So I haven't actually completed the course. I just asked someone to do it up for me. I find it interesting that they said they gave me a merit instead of a distinction, even though I was just asking them to do up a fake one for me. But this is what it would look like. That could be your name up there on that diploma. So there's also community, and community can be a little bit of a wishy-washy sort of benefit. So I'm going to show you 2 examples of how this will help you on the course. So this is a screenshot from our Slack group, which is where all the community stuff actually happens. So at 3:24 on the 30th of September, that's a Friday, by the way, Kenny asked, what's the difference between angular.min.js and angular.js, which is a really specific question that you can't really find if you're Googling. So within half an hour, he got two very detailed answers. One was from a fellow student, and the other was actually from a Code Institute employee. Here's a second example. This is at 3 minutes past 8 on, I think, a Thursday. And Darren's asking, why aren't my API calls working? And within 23 minutes, Mark Railton has gotten onto him and said, this is how you actually do this. So there's a really strong community to help you with your progress there. There's also career support. So I'll give you the high level version of this. Essentially, we have a careers week. So this is where we bring students in both from our online program and from our bootcamp, and we actually bring in recruiters who actually help you with mock interviews. We bring in employers who actually pitch their jobs to students in the classroom, and that's available to you whether you do the online program or the classroom. Now, I'm not actually going to play this video because we're a little short on time, but I will send out a link in the email. So the other ways that we support you, there's student care that actually keep you on track and accountable. So we actually monitor your progress as you go through the course. And if we think you're struggling or you haven't logged in for a number of weeks, we actually get on to you and ask why and how we can help. Then there's mentors who work one-on-one with you. If you're in the online program, you have 20 hours of mentoring to use. If you're in the classroom, they're with you every day, Monday to Friday for as long as you need. And finally, we continually update the curriculum based on what we hear from the Industry Advisory Council and most importantly, from students. So you'll create 3 great web apps. That's what you'll create. And these are sort of the ones they look like. It's a little bit like Yelp or IMDb. It's something akin to Google Analytics and Kickstarter as well. So there's more student projects available on our website, actually on the homepage, if you'd like to check more of them out. And this is just a summary of everything we just spoke about there. So we've covered that you can learn this, that employers are looking for this, there's a big demand, and also that you can do it. So just to give you an idea of how it breaks down, the full-time course in Dublin, it's about 13 weeks long. So 12 weeks in classroom and 13th week is the careers week. It's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and the next date is in January, and the price is $8,900. But if you're interested in this, I would stick around for the next couple of minutes because it'll be worth your while. Then there's also the Mentor.online, which means you can study anywhere. So that's up to 52 weeks, and it's sort of online learning, and your mentor works with you throughout, and that's 4497. So the Mentor.online, we always get questions about how it breaks down. So if you were to do it in 36 weeks, which is about the average, that would be 15 hours a week. So that would be the equivalent of an hour every evening, and maybe a day and a bit on Saturday. So what I'd like to do is just to open up the floor to questions. And as those questions are coming in, I'm actually going to fill you in on the 2 bonuses that I promised earlier. So the first bonus is a 20% discount for anyone who signs up for the Mentored Online program in the month of November. So it is the 16th of November. You have 14 days left to sign up for any classroom bootcamp and get a 20% discount. So if you wanted to sign up for a bootcamp that's actually later on in 2017, you can do that. If you want to get in on the January bootcamp, you can do that as well. So, well, we're sticking around for, because that 20% discount is actually the equivalent to about €2,000 or so. The second bonus is the first 4 modules free. So I'm just going to actually type this into the chat box, which is bit.ly/codeinstitute-demo. Hopefully I've entered that right. And what that'll actually do is you can sign up and you can get the first 4 modules of the course free. So what I'd like to do is just to invite you to ask any questions that you have. And what I'll do is, I did get a question that always comes in is, how are you better than, say, an online competitor? Or, a common one would be a university. But I don't get the sense that there's a lot of people who are considering going back to university. I see a lot of people who are thinking of changing career, which usually means you have a setup already. So what we'll talk about is maybe why the diploma is a great choice if you're looking to change career, in particular in Dublin or in Ireland, I should say. So there'd be a couple of things there. The first thing I would say is mainly in terms of the networking opportunities that are available through the Careers Week. You can attend multiple Careers Weeks if you like. meet a number of employers and get a number of feedback from different recruiters who will be doing mock interviews with you. The second thing I would say is the accreditation is a really important part of this puzzle. The fact that you can walk away with not only a really strong portfolio that's built on the latest technology, sort of as advised by our Industry Advisory Council, but the fact that you also walk away with a diploma, that's really important as well, because it means that employers can look at that. They can look at your CV and say, a Code Institute full stack diploma. I know what that means. I understand that. So those would be the three reasons I put forward to you. So Sean has actually asked, after January 2017, when is the next start date? So Sean, the boot camps run every 3.5 months or so. So I think it is January 2017, April 2017, and September 2017. I don't know the exact start dates. I'm not sure on that. I'll have to get back to you, but I'm not sure of the exact ones. So Evelyn has asked, are most of the employers based in Dublin? So Evelyn, I'm just looking back to see where you said you're from. You're from Donegal, or you're in Donegal at the moment. So we get this question asked a lot. So I can't say for the exact number of employers who are hiring for this in Donegal, but we did an open evening down in Cork a number of months ago, and we actually had a local recruiter come in and speak to us. We were actually really surprised by the number of employers he had in Cork that were actually hiring for junior developer positions, which is kind of where our students tend to go. So there's a huge amount of jobs throughout the country. I know sort of anecdotally through a recruiter that I'm linked in with on LinkedIn, that there's a number of jobs in development going in Belfast, but I'm not sure of the exact number that are in Donegal. Would I say the majority of employers are in Dublin? I think they tend to cluster in centres. They tend to be based in Cork or Dublin or Belfast, but there's lots of employers that decide they don't actually want to be based there. And there's a lot of talent that they're able to get by having a company in Carlow or Mayo or Donegal or whatever it is. So kind of a long answer to your question. I'd probably say, you know, maybe 60-40, 60% based in Dublin and 40% based in other parts of the country. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to ask, because we kind of want to make these webinars useful to you. I suppose everyone who's come along today, everyone from Sean to Evelyn to Thomas to Lewis to Kieran, Brian, and everyone else, there's a reason you came along today, and that's because you were interested in changing your career. You know, sort of 91% of you here said you still think you need a career change. But the whole, I suppose, the interesting thing is you all came along because you were thinking of potentially making a career change into coding. But for all of you, there's probably 1 to 3 things that are holding you back. So in my own example, if I was still a guitar teacher, I would say, you know, number 1, I don't know if I can actually learn how to code. I don't know if I'll be able to do that. Number 2, I don't know where I'll find the time to actually learn all this stuff and get back in. And number 3, how do I know that I'll actually go on and get a job in this field and that it isn't just something I'm spending money on and won't get returned? So please, those would be my questions. So if any of you want answers to any of those or have any specific questions, please ask them. That's the whole point of this webinar. So Brian has asked, I find before when trying to break into the coding industry, the biggest obstacle seems to be experience, regardless of what course you do. What makes Code Institute different to the rest? Realistically, what are the chances of employers actually considering you for a coding role? So Brian, that's an absolutely fantastic question. So what I'm going to say is, I'm just going to take it in parts because it's quite a long one. So the first part is breaking into the coding industry, the biggest obstacle seems to be experience. So I'm going to agree with you here, Brian. If you go online, you will rarely find a job listing that looks for 0 years experience, unless it's an internship or something like that. So what we found is, through working with our students and recruiters and other employers, is a lot of it, if you look at just the job listings, is really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the jobs that are going. So the way I'll explain this is, the majority of jobs, the vast majority of jobs, never actually hit a jobs board. The only time a job actually hits a job board is when the employer has gotten so tired of not having a person in this role that they actually send it on to a recruiter and they put it in all the jobs boards. Sorry, I just need a drink of water. So that's the first thing. 80% of jobs never actually hit the jobs boards. But let's talk about the jobs that are there. So there'll be a number of jobs that look for at least 2 years experience. And what we found as well, that there's a difference between being underqualified and unqualified. So if I, for example, was looking to become the CEO of, I don't know, Volkswagen, I would be unqualified to do that. I don't have the skills nor the experience to take that on. But if I were to look at becoming a marketing manager at a startup in Ireland, I think I'd have a pretty good shot at that. I haven't done everything. I don't have the experience of it, but I have a lot of, I could sort of argue that if they're looking for 5 years experience, I could argue that I have, 2 to 3, which isn't a total deal breaker. And a lot of the time, the recruiters or the employers will tell you that those requirements are actually filters. They're looking for someone. They're looking to not get 100 CVs in that are all unqualified. So that's the first thing. So the next part of the question: what makes Code Institute different to the rest? So there's a couple of things, and I'll just name 3 of them. So the first one is the Careers Week, which is where we actually bring employers in who pitch their jobs to you. That's a really unusual thing. Even having a Careers Week would be very, very unusual in any of these courses, and feel free to look online. You'll find that most of them don't have anything related to career. The reason we have that is we wanted it to be more than just a course where you learn the skills. We wanted it to be a course where you can learn the skills and go out and have the skills to find a job and be successful in your interview. The second thing that I would say is there's a focus throughout the program on building a portfolio that really is top-notch. So we do try and encourage students to put as much time as they possibly can into their portfolio. So the stronger your portfolio, the better chances you have of getting through with an employer. I'll give you an example of this. Ovi, whose project I actually showed you, he was going for a mid-level development role. By experience, he didn't really have any right to interview for it, but he actually got to the 4th round and was pipped at the end by a developer with 3 years experience. So he was able to actually get through on a job that he really had no right to apply for, to actually get through to the final round and only miss out because someone with 3 years experience was available. That's something really strong. So that speaks to the strength of his portfolio. And finally, the skills that you actually learn, the technologies that you actually learn, they all come from the Industry Advisory Council. So you know that you're learning skills that are as up to date as possible. Right, so Connor has then asked, is there any discount for the online course? So Connor, there is no discount for the online course at the moment. The only thing I could say is if you bring someone else who also wants to do the coding course, we will offer a discount of 500 euros. So you can get the online for 3,997 if you bring someone else who also buys the course at that price. So it's our Bring a Buddy discount. So then Sean has asked, what would you advise is the best period of training time to complete the coding diploma in? So Sean, I would say it completely depends on your situation. For the classroom bootcamp, it can only be done in 12 weeks. It's the only way to do it. In the Mentored Online, it depends on your schedule. It depends on how quickly you want to change. It depends on a lot of things. But I would say for me, I like to look at the 36-week period because it's not so long that it feels like it'll take forever, but it's not so short. But it's not so intense in terms of hours. Like 15 hours a week is not a huge amount of time. If you did an hour and a half each evening and a full day on Saturday, you could get it done in those 36 weeks. So that's what I would aim for, but it depends on if you have a family, if you have a job, if you want to hold down that job while you're doing the course, all these kinds of things. Connor has asked, if you have a portfolio of your own work, an app or website that you designed. So Connor, I'm not sure exactly what that question is, but that you will have a portfolio of your own work, which you've created, all the apps and websites that you've put in there. So again, what I'm going to say, if you have any questions at all, every single one of you has 1 to 3 things that you're thinking right now, and you're saying, that's the reason I'm not going to go ahead with this. So yeah, make sure you ask those questions. Even if I'm, even if you still say after you hear my answer, actually, no, I'm still not interested. That's fine. But, if all you did is came away from this webinar and said, you know what, I don't want to change my career to coding, it's not quite for me, that would still be success, because at least you've moved a step further in your mind. So please ask as many questions as you like. So Thomas has asked, please recap the cost of the Mentored Online course. So Thomas, the Mentored Online costs €4,497. You can get that for €3,997 if you bring someone else on the course as well. And that includes 20 hours of working with a mentor. So an example of a few mentors, we have Daniel Shapiro. He runs a startup out of New York. There's Jessamine Smith. She's a chief technology officer in Canada, and on and on and on. So they're really, really good people. And to get 20 hours of their time would cost a huge amount on its own, probably the cost of the course itself. And it's only because they work with so many of our students that you're actually able to get 20 hours and the course content and the careers week and the community and everything else for that $4,500. So Colm has said, thanks very much. Colm, you're very welcome. So Evelyn has asked, is a high level of maths necessary? So thanks for the question, Evelyn. Actually, no, a high level of maths is not necessary. Basic addition and subtraction, multiplication and division will be all you would need on the program. You don't need to know anything beyond those 4 things: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Okay. So if there's any other questions, I'm very happy to answer them. I'm also aware that it's 1:45, which may be at the end of some people's lunch breaks. So please ask as many questions as you would like. So Joseph has asked, is the 20 hours of mentor time one-to-one or in a classroom setting for the online course? So Joseph, the 20 hours of mentor time is one-to-one. So you're one-to-one over Skype, and you actually work with your mentor throughout that time, just the two of you. And that's how that works. So it's 20 hours of individual attention that you're given there. So Brian has asked, do you offer payment options? So Brian, we do in sort of a roundabout kind of way. So there's 3 things you can actually do, and I'll explain them all to you. So the first one is paying upfront, which probably isn't much of a payment option. But what you can do is you can go to Bank of Ireland, which we have a relationship with, and say, look, I want to do this course. And they'll actually give you a student rate, which has a couple of advantages on that. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, just talk to us and we'll put you in touch with someone in Bank of Ireland. They'll review your application regardless of if you've been with AIB or Ulster Bank or whatever it is for the rest of, for before at this point. So that's one option. So you can get the full amount from a bank loan and pay it off that. The second thing we do is you could actually pay a deposit to secure your place on the course, and we'll work out a payment plan with you. So if you want to say, I'll pay 1,000 now, 2,000 in February, and the remaining balance in July, then we can do that. We'll work with you on that. So those are the payment options. I'd love to have a payment option where I say, for €400 a month, you can get the course. Unfortunately, we don't have something like that. I'd love to have that one day, though. So if there's any other questions, again, I'm very happy to answer them. And Evelyn has said, good to know. Thanks, Evelyn. You're very welcome. Thank you for coming along. So if there's any other questions, feel free to throw them out now. And yeah. So Connor has asked an interesting one. Can you pay per stream, pay as you go? So Connor, we don't actually offer that. I suppose one of the, I mean, there's a number of reasons that we don't. I won't really go into them, but no, there is no pay as you go, pay per stream option. All right, so Brian has said, thank you. It's been informative and interesting. Brian, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming along. Again, what I'd like to say is a number of you came along because you wanted to change career, and you were still fairly certain you wanted to change career, even after you heard 3 student stories. So what I would say is keep thinking about it. Keep making moves in this direction. Keep trying to decide if you want to change, because if I could go back 5 years ago and tell myself, while I was a guitar teacher, what moves to make, the only piece of advice I'd actually give is keep moving in the right direction. So if you're not happy with where you are now, make moves in some direction, whether it's a direction with Code Institute or anything else. So that would be my advice to myself 5 years ago. So Evelyn has asked, would I need any specific software? So Evelyn, the only software, all the software will be provided for you. The only thing you'll need in terms of a laptop is a Microsoft or a Windows or a Mac. So for Windows, it has to be Windows 8 or higher and have 8 gigabytes of RAM. And for Mac, it has to be OS X 10 or higher. And again, 8 gigabytes of RAM. But that would be the only thing. Everything else is downloadable online and is available free. So Sean has said, yes, thanks. It's great to learn a lot about the course. Cheers. So Sean, you're very welcome. If you're, I can't remember if you were the man from Mayo, but the first man from Mayo, oh no, that's actually Lewis. So yeah, if there's any other questions, I'm very happy to answer them. All right, well, I think we have hit the end of the webinar. I think we are all done for questions. So thank you very much for coming along. What we'll be doing is we'll be following up with each of you and giving you a quick call. If you'd like to talk more about your options, if you'd like to just have a second opinion on the direction you're going, we're very happy to do that. So we'll call you in the next couple of days and just see how things went. So Connor has said, I have to go now. Thank you, Owen. Connor, you're very welcome, and thank you for coming along. I'm sure we'll speak again soon. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to email us, info@codeinstitute.net. So thanks very much for coming along, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.